Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of BlockFi, the indexing company. And today we're going to talk about data again. I had a few conversations with founders building cool products, but now we're going back into data and data infrastructure in DeFi. So with me, I've got Ryan from vaults.fyi, and we're going to chat about like how to find DeFi data, what's the relation to all this like stablecoin hype and what value their users get from their data. So welcome, Ryan. Could you introduce yourself a little bit and how you got into crypto?
Yeah, very happy to. Hey, well, thanks for having me on the podcast, first of all. But yeah, my name's Ryan, co-founder, CEO here of vaults.fyi. I guess at this point, my whole career has been crypto, other than quick 3 or 4 months right out of college when I was doing something slightly different. But yeah, I mean, somewhat of a boring path, studied finance in undergrad, planned to go kind of a more investment banking route. And then yeah, just went down the crypto rabbit hole during my senior year when I didn't actually have a lot of course load, and immediately decided that, why am I going to go do these other careers when crypto seems like this really exciting thing, kind of at the, mix of finance and technology. So moved out to San Francisco, kind of without a job at first, tried to figure things out. Eventually wound up joining a company called TrustToken. They were a very early and in many ways, in fact, way too early company trying to do kind of tokenization of real world assets. So that was actually one of the very first topics that I was interested in. This is back when DeFi was kind of barely a thing. So I don't think Compound was live yet. Aave was, if it was live, it was ETHLend. DAI was still single collateral DAI, Sai. So yeah, just a very, very different industry. Worked on stablecoins for a while. With Trust Token, we wound up launching a DeFi protocol called TrueFi. That was focused more on on-chain credit, which again, one of those markets that I think we were probably just a bit too early on. It was kind of us, Maple, Goldfinch, Centrifuge. Of those names, really only Maple's kind of come back and is now thriving. So, but yeah, just very interesting things I've gotten the chance to work on. And then we started the company that became vaults.fyi back in like April of 2023. And initially, we're doing something different. And, kind of within a few months, stumbled on what would become eventually vaults.fyi. For really like the first year and a half, it was kind of like the second or third priority we were working on as a company, as we kind of had another business we were working towards. And then back in the summer of 2024, yeah, 2024, we started getting real pull that people were willing to pay for both kind of APIs of what we were building. They wanted us to build out more capabilities. And so, over the next 6 months, we kind of cut off everything that we were doing. And then the vaults.fyi that hopefully people know today really has kind of only been live since January 2025. That's when we launched app.vaults.fyi. We only got our first paying customer for the API in April of 2025. And yeah, now off to the races.
Nice, that's good. Like 1 year celebration here. But it's also nice to see that your experience from like basically some yield products and this DeFi infra um, is probably helping what you're now building because you have a good insight from like credit and like cash flows. How does that translate to the current product you're building?
Um, maybe in a very indirect or roundabout way where, haven't had the chance to work on credit and, just like taking non-blockchain native assets and bringing them on chain. I think we have found when we worked on that TrueFi, we found it to be sort of uniquely difficult and in many ways not sort of composable with broader DeFi. Up until really recently with Maple's Sierra product, most credit like assets were never really integrated into kind of the broader DeFi ecosystem. And they also had a lot of issues when it came to transparency. So, not to kind of, pick on them or anything, but like, I don't know if you remember the protocol Goldfinch. which was trying to do kind of like lending to emerging markets, like a real good kind of feel good story around credit. And, most of those assets on that protocol, I mean, they had a ridiculously high default rate across both kind of their junior pools, but also they had, the situation where it wound up basically wiping out their senior tranche as well. And I just kind of look back at some of the experiments that were being run in more credit type things, and they were just never taking advantage of the best qualities of crypto, right? You lost all of the transparency that you might have being able to investigate like a Morpho Vault today or an Aave market or whatever it may be, because these assets lived off chain and you didn't really have look through into what was happening in these off chain type of assets. So with the original kind of version of Vaults FYI, we were actually very DeFi maximalist in terms of the things that we wanted to integrate, that we wanted to show. Today, we are much wider in the types of opportunities that we capture, mainly focused on just things that customers are asking for. But yeah, in some ways, I think Vaults FYI was actually maybe a pushback to some of these credit things and trying to refocus on fully on chain type of products.
Yeah, there's this big portion where like you can check the on-chain part, but really verifying the off-chain part, like I think Maple did this actually well, and even then they got hit hard by that. But yeah, there is this off-chain data part that was the risk in those in that sense. But you focusing first on on-chain helps setting a good foundation to all of this. So how does this translate now? Like, are you also integrating some of these off-chain data sources if there's like real-world assets involved or like cash flows that are on-chain?
Not really yet. So the way that we try to approach everything that we do today at Vaults FYI is to be very on-chain maximalist in terms of where we're getting information from. So when you go to vaults.fyi today and you look at the APYs that we show, they are derived, generally speaking, entirely from on-chain share price data. So we're not relying on an off-chain manager reporting that the expected APY on these products is going to be X. We're taking these share prices and, on an hourly basis and essentially kind of recomputing the APYs on top of those based on how those share prices have changed over time and what's actually been realized to people who are in those products. The only real place today where we're using kind of off-chain data is around Merkle. So we kind of just don't have a choice on that one, as so many protocols have adopted Merkle as their standard for distributing token rewards. That information does not live fully on chain. And so we do have to use that source. But I think that's probably the only major off chain source that we use today. There are some interesting things we can still do around NAV and even kind of like comparing sort of the estimated or expected APYs against the realized APYs. I think there's something interesting to do there, just not something we've done yet.
Yeah, yeah. But it's an important thing to verify as like an external party. Like, of course, all these builders they present the best APY available in their product. There were like trends where people would also include, for example, grant tokens into that APY, and then they had like these insane APYs, or the actual product wasn't even generating proper yield. It was purely those emissions or something. But it's good to verify that as an external source to have a more neutral way. Like, how often do you like clash with a team that is looking at your data and they're like, nah, nah, you should represent this way, but you're opinionated on those statistics being clear and neutral?
Um, yeah, I'd say early on we had a lot more clashing with teams about this. As of late, the only places where we really have any sort of dispute is, and I won't say them by name, but there's one team where we integrate a bunch of their products, and you know, we only for everything we integrate, which today is over about 1,000 different opportunities to earn yield. we generally speaking have one methodology across everything that we do. So it's very, very standardized. That said, I think, you know, on your own front end, there's a lot of different games you can play to sort of make the APY maybe look better than it is. In our case, in the specific case that I'm thinking of, it was a team where, uh, they were showing really good APYs, and they reached out to us and said, "Hey, why are you showing our APYs are so low?" Or in some cases, actually showing a negative return for lenders in the products. And we said, well, we're just applying this common methodology. And like, here's the chart of the share price of your vault going up and then coming down. So if it's coming down, you know, over some time period, people there who have deposited or withdrawn have recognized the loss. And I think actually what the guy who reached out to us from that team learned in the process was that he wasn't sure how they were calculating the APY on their own front end. So there's actually a bunch of those where they're smaller teams today, but we do have one or two teams that actually rely on our data to power their own front ends as well. I think that's like a great sort of, neutral way to give a little bit of extra trust to your users so that they know that they're getting a independently verified APY.
That's cool, and I think it will show trust from people depositing. Like, hey, this is externally verified, and it means that somebody is normalizing this across DeFi, which then can bring back these standards to more teams or the team, whether it's from the team side or from your side. At least there's more verification happening and a good incentive to show the right API. So with more of these stable coins and deposits like coming on chain, because we now see a big boom in payments and payment flows coming to the blockchain, um, people on ramping more and holding stable coins. I think there's a huge opportunity to turn on that switch for either products that's where people hold these stable coins, or the people themselves to do research and find out like, hey, where's good yields. So where does vaults.fyi sit in that whole stack? And yeah, basically this user is like, now what with these funds, and there's like a multi-billion dollar opportunity here from all these different platforms to tap into that. So could you tell like how, whether it's like a wallet or like some fintech or a single user can even use your data to find those best opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of our thesis and kind of what we're trying to do with our APIs is address this question that we've heard from some fintechs and from some kind of stablecoin players of, these big companies spend all of this time, they integrate stablecoins, maybe they see some increased efficiencies, but I think a lot of them find themselves in this place of asking, okay, we've integrated stablecoins, we've got better, uh, deposits, withdrawals, remittances, whatever it may be. What do our users do next? And increasingly, the answer is, they want to have some sort of dollar denominated type of savings account. And what our APIs enable is for those types of platforms, whether fintechs, wallets, really any kind of interface that has distribution or some sort of captive user base to say, okay, hey, we're going to use the vaults.fyi API and integrate several different stablecoin opportunities, perhaps across different risk thresholds, so that our users can kind of stay within platform. And, we as this wallet or fintech or whatever can become more of a hub for their different financial activities. So that's very much how we've been thinking of it. We've seen this, now, uh, uh, I think really kind of happening in like two ways for these platforms. Um, we're today seeing folks like, so one of the most recent integrations we just had go live was with a company called Jumper.exchange. It's, kind of LifeEye's very popular swap and bridge front end. They just launched an earn tab. And if you go to that tab today, they're showing their users, I think upwards of probably 100 different options of things that they could do to earn a yield, both on stablecoins, but also on ETH, BTC, etc. And I can imagine that from their perspective, They feel like, hey, we have all these people that are coming to our site to do swaps and bridges regularly. Let's give them another thing to do. Let's create more stickiness with our user base. Let's use the vaults.fyi APIs for position tracking as well, so that they come back, they look at their positions, they maybe think about moving that around here. They're doing more things through kind of a singular hub. I think, at a kind of centralized exchange level, we see the same strategy playing out with, say, a Coinbase, where Coinbase, of course, is trying to kind of do every crypto action possible across the centralized exchange, the wallet, the, base, the L2. So it's just kind of becoming more and more of a common strategy, I'd say. And, we hope to be able to power a lot of people that want to do that.
Nice. Yeah. And how much do you take on as like a curator role? Like there is some opinion already in how you build these APIs and these verifications, but then there's still another step on top where you could say like, hey, this is like high risk or low risk, or are you just giving some metric to your like the companies integrating you so they can choose for their users? Like where does that responsibility end up?
We try not to be very opinionated today. And that is sort of by design of trying to be very neutral in the things that we do. I think what I've found is that a lot of the people we talk to already kind of have an opinion of what they want to integrate with. They've perhaps heard of Aave 100 times, and they're like, okay, this seems to be the most Lindy protocol in crypto. Maybe they've been pitched by Morpho, and they're just thinking, okay, we want to do Aave, we want to do Morpho, and then maybe there's something kind of random they throw in there. They're like, oh, we've heard of Athena, and our users have been asking for this as well. Uh, what we do provide to customers is that right now we call it our reputation score. It's kind of like a risk score light, where we're not taking any subjective opinion on the risk of these different products, but we are looking at sort of the lindiness. Lindiness being this term of kind of the longer something has been around, the longer it's likely to continue being around. And we measure that by looking at the TVL over time in different products. So, what does that mean exactly? So, something like Lido that has had tens of billions of dollars worth of TVL for many years now in this framework is ranked as kind of the highest thing that we support, you know. And I think I always like to say that kind of as a sanity check. I agree with that as well. If Lido was hacked, I think it would be sort of, we'd have to like roll back the chain or something. So, it makes sense to me that that's considered the most secure thing in this framework. And then things like Aave are number two, specifically something like the Aave V3 USDT pool and USDC pools on mainnet. Each of those have secured billions of dollars of TVL for many years. And so, yes, those are like very high in the framework. And yeah, so that's how we think about that today. We're working on evolving that because I think we've been surprised to find how much people actually want to rely on those scores. I think there's a lot of cool things that we can do there too. For example, if we have more of a robust sort of low risk, medium risk, high risk, I think we can start to have sort of concept of risk adjusted returns, right? So, if Aave is a 99 out of 100 and some other protocol is a 70 out of 100 on this framework, are you being compensated properly at the 70 out of 100 protocol? So there's some cool things we can start to build there. I think you can build other kind of products on top of that. But
I love thinking about these kind of metrics where you can actually, with those metrics, decide for a user who might be more risk averse or they want high returns, but it's fine if they, can stay in the pool longer. They're fine with volatility. They don't pull it out. Like you can all like quantify that. And like there's this whole thing about having these metrics where you can also have these derivatives of those metrics that tell you that. So like a volatile APY, like some people would pull their funds directly out when it goes negative once. Well, for those people, you want to have a metric that says like, hey, this is a very stable one. So those kind of metrics I think are super valuable. But I think in a way for a lot of users, you actually want to abstract them away because they don't have the knowledge and expertise to think about it. So, and it's also why the question like, responsibility lie. But yeah,
Right.
you can do that with if you have various metrics, you can at least tailor that to various customers and wishes. So um, I think that like brings also up the question where like your how do you integrate new protocols? Like um where does that discovery start from your end?
When we first started and we had no customers, it was honestly one of two things. It was we saw a protocol that was interested, maybe some people on the team were using, and we integrated things that way. Also, very early on, we had teams that discovered us very early, were very excited about what we were doing. They reached out and, we were grateful for anyone paying attention. So we integrated things that way. At this point, I would say integrations are like 95% customer requests. There's almost nothing at this point anymore that we have time to even, think about adding that are just things that we think are cool. At this point, our customers, whether it's the Kraken, Jumper, Gauntlet, etc., they have asks of what they want to see supported, what they need data on, what they need integrated, and so we just let that drive our roadmap today entirely.
Nice, nice. And of course, like one of the things about data is if you're getting questions about it, at least somebody's looking at it, and that's a good sign. Um, I always have that credo with like dashboards. If you build a dashboard and nobody in the company is like, "Oh, what does this data point mean?" Nobody's using it. So here it's
Totally.
probably like, "Yeah, I want a new protocol." That means the rest is actually already valuable. Um, but what you end up with is like this inflow of like all these new protocols and you have to maintain it. I think there's quite a challenge in that too, because now you have to it might go exponentially in how many protocols you have to track. How do you keep updated with them? Are you like looking for the contracts if they get updated and then get a signal that says like, hey, maybe you should review this protocol because something changed, or is that like all automated? How does it look like?
Yeah, this is actually one of our big goals for this quarter is, we're calling it kind of bulletproofing infra, but just really up leveling what we're doing on the sort of automated alert side and just sort of like data freshness and a lot of things around this. Yeah, so just data freshness and all of that is another word. Because we don't use external APIs besides Merkle, we don't. We're pretty good at like picking up every time a new Morpho vault gets deployed and all of these kinds of things. There are some things we're doing to improve how we do discovery of new vaults and new things like that today. And then yeah, I mean, more of the places that we get, where it seems like we're out of sync on things, like if a new set of smart contracts get deployed and we're not connected to those new factories, we have to go in and do that. Merkle is probably the place where we have the most like breakage or staleness or all of that today. Each Merkle campaign for how they do token incentives might be different, requires us to implement it differently, make sure that we're capturing all of the data correctly. Just this morning, we had a little bug from the Merkle API where I think we're overstating the token rewards on Morpho on Unichain or something. So these things certainly do happen. Generally, though, it is just a result of where, um, we're relying on external APIs. The other place where maybe we've had some challenges have been around smaller networks like Berachain or things like that, where I think on Berachain a few months ago they paused the network, um, and our just database kind of like broke for a bunch of things temporarily because we're like, well, we didn't know how to recognize something like that. But yeah, just overall, I'd say it's actually quite good. Yeah, but right now, really just working on improving performance significantly.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and I think that shows also why teams probably won't build this themselves, right? Like you have this good overview of all these protocols. You are in connection with these protocols to take care of their uh, this verification of that data. If everybody would build this themselves, like what would be their troubles, or like why doesn't that scale well?
Yeah, we're actually talking about this with kind of someone right now who, you know, bigger company. We really want to work with them. They hit us with the, well, couldn't we just hire a few people and do this ourselves? And, I think the question it always comes down to is how many protocols do you want to integrate and what level of depth do you want to provide to users? There certainly are many cases today of like, what Coinbase has done with the single Morpho product that they support, where absolutely, if you want to build an integration for one single pool or one single vault on one protocol, you know, a competent engineering team can definitely do that. There's no question about it. But yes, to your point, where things start to break is where you want to try and build a more comprehensive product experience for users, where you need fresh APY data across tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of individual opportunities. Your users, you have a demanding user base that's constantly asking for more things, right? So maybe on day one, they're satisfied with Aave and Morpho, but then they want Vita, and then they want Resolve, and then they want something on Hyper EVM. And then they're saying, well, hey, can you also support Pendle opportunities? And now this team is like, okay, maybe we shouldn't staff up 15 people to kind of do this full time. Data point that I always like to share here is I think the wallet that has done this the best themselves and like doesn't use any external APIs as far as I'm aware, built it all in house is OKX. OKX has a really good like consumer DeFi non-custodial wallet. And in talking to their team, I think it's like 10 to 20 engineers full time just focused on integrations. And so for most companies, that's just not going to be a staffing up that makes sense if you want to build something at this scale.
Yeah, and it's also like you'll spend so much money on this while you probably can just get it out of the box. And then if there's
Exactly.
features missing, right, you can just add it yourself. Like that might just cost you one engineer or two in that part. So I think it's about what, yeah, like what we're seeing service providers, like people, especially now with like the AI and vibe coding boom, people are spending like hours or a week to just replace a solution that is like $10. And you're like, yeah, like you're not valuing your time enough. Just because you can do it yourself, it might not be why you should. But that's, I think, it engineer native behavior where they always want to
Very
do it
much.
themselves. Yeah. Yeah. We see that at Indexing Code too, where some people are like, I'm going to try this myself. And then a few months later, they'll come back and are like, yeah, we solved like 20% of that. And the rest, that's the hard part. And I'm like, yeah, you know, we get that. And we went through this already. So like, let
Yeah.
us help you. So I think that is what you're seeing with your
Yeah, I mean, we
product.
we we have one customer today who actually when kind of they started using us, they were building in tandem, like, some of this stuff themselves, and I think their intention was, at some point to stop using us and just rely entirely, on their own integrations they built out, and in practice, it's actually gone the other way. They've stopped building out their own integrations and just rely on us now as we've added more and more coverage across the things that they want. So, that's certainly I think the path we'll see. Hopefully, many of these go. Right? Hopefully, for the sake of my business.
Of course, but yeah, it's also just at least they went through the process of like, what do we need, and
Exactly.
and what is helping our product. So it's never a bad experience for a team, but then they have to see it as a research phase instead of like, oh, we couldn't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
it helps.
listen, I'm also a stubborn person, so sometimes you need to just learn by you know doing, failing, getting your hands dirty.
Yeah, same, same. And then for because this is also we're very focused on DeFi native teams and in this conversation, but how are you thinking about servicing like the new generation, like the fintechs that are now opening crypto rails or banks that want to take care of these crypto flows? Do you have like any conversations with those parties already, or is it they first need to bring the flows on chain and then they can think about where do we put this money now it's on chain?
I think in many cases, everyone is at least thinking about this stuff to some degree. So even if they're far away from even taking the first step, what I have found is that a lot of these bigger firms are certainly happy to kind of take a call, take a meeting, learn a bit today. At the same time, I think with a lot of these larger institutions, what I'm finding kind of in practice is, I'm thinking of one specifically. Maybe we had a first call with them a year ago, 12, 9 months ago. We keep in touch with kind of periodic updates of what we're up to, have a call every 6 months. And, now maybe in Q2, they could become a customer of like our data APIs to begin with. So some of these things do just move slow. And I think it is just classic sales and relationship building with some of these bigger companies. In terms of getting in front of them, though, many of them have crypto teams at this point. A lot of them, they regularly have people at conferences that are relatively accessible. They're generally down to take meetings. Maybe they have venture teams that are even more willing to kind of meet startups and introduce to the right groups within their companies. So, yeah, I think my feedback to people would be a lot of these companies are probably more accessible than they look from the outside. These bigger companies.
Yeah, yeah, sounds very familiar to me too. It's a longer process because they're bigger companies, so things move way slower. But also, I think there's a bit of a compliance thing to it where they really want to make the right decision. And I think that's where also the social aspect comes into play. Like they also, because you're staying in touch, because you're updating them, they're seeing like, oh, this is not just another quick crypto startup. This is actually a solid company that has some longevity here. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I see this thing. Um, is there anything next for Falls at FYI that is like not data related or things you are actually building on top of the data? Like, where is this roadmap taking you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you kind of think about what we do today, in some sense, it is old data, but really our APIs kind of do three things today. It's, all of the market data, of course. It's then everything required for transactions as well. So for almost all of the protocols that we integrate with, when you can use our APIs to actually integrate the deposit functionality, withdraw functionality, rewards claiming functionality, right? All of the actions to interact with every part of Athena, Aave, Morpho, Compound, Lido, down the list of great things. And then position tracking as well. So actually, like, you can get down to the level of daily P&L. So like you can see your daily P&L from a yield generating position on Aave, things like that. So a big part of what we're doing is just building out better and better around each of those kind of core three pieces of the API today. Um, we're also building out additional things for cross-chain capabilities. So one of the biggest things we hear from people today is that they integrate our APIs and maybe their users have assets on 3 or 4 different networks, and they want to allow users to take stablecoins from one chain, deposit it into stablecoin vault on another chain. We're going to be integrating that into the API to allow for cross-chain deposits, withdrawals, all of that. And then, yeah, outside of that, I'd say we're working on giving our partners new ways to monetize as well. I'll just kind of tease that one for now. I don't want to go too deep into that publicly yet, but trying to help people who integrate our APIs more easily monetize the flow that they're creating. And what else? Yeah, there's some new data types as well. So we're working on integrating Pendle right now, so that users can have fixed term APY access through Pendle PTs specifically. That will expand into other products as well, like Infinify's fixed term type of products. Um, yeah, we're doing a lot, and then obviously on the business side, just trying to get more of these integrations going too. That's certainly my big focus.
Nice. Yeah, sounds like a lot on the roadmap, but it makes a lot of sense too. Where if you're holding like the information layer, like the data layer, you also can tell something about the execution because you can analyze that and then you can optimize for that. So something around like automation on top of that data is, I feel, always a good next step. Um, yeah.
Yeah, we've been very excited too about other people using our data and execution and position tracking to build more products on top of our APIs. In practice, we have a few companies today building AI agent type of products. Um, I think we also want to try and I don't know what form this will take, but make it easier for customers who implement us to kind of have their own products out of the box. So you can think of that like, hey, I'm so and so company. My user base is not very crypto native, but they want access to DeFi yields or higher yield in some way. And we can just kind of say, like, yes, here's like a high risk option, medium risk option, low risk option. Maybe your user wants like 60% in low risk, 20% in medium, 20% in high, and gets a better blended rate or something like that. So, yeah, trying to think about what form that takes because what we don't want to do is just launch another set of smart contracts or another kind of vault that I don't think really people need. And so we've been thinking a lot about how we can use sort of account abstraction method, some of these things to maybe have like session key enabled batch transactions, things of that sort.
Yeah, more optimization instead of like introducing another standards because we already have like hundreds of standards that again then need a new standard, so you never solve that. Yeah.
Yes, lots of standards, and you know, I don't know, not particularly strong user benefit from one to the other. I'd say.
No, no, and it's just like more work for you to integrate. So,
Yes,
yeah.
for us especially. Yes.
Um, cool. Yeah, I think we touched on a lot, but is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you really want to tell people about what you're building?
Yeah, I think where we are today is I think we've spent the last 12ish months or so feeling increasingly confident that we have some early product market fit. And so, if that excites you and you're interested in some of these data challenges, please do get in touch. If you are interested in adding earn capabilities to your product, building AI agents, or if you are a kind of quantitative or research firm that wants high quality MPY data, TVL data, really everything associated with these products, please get in touch. Uh, my Telegram's just my full name, so I'm very easy to get in touch with.
Yeah, we'll make sure to add your like Twitter and the website to the section of this podcast, like on YouTube and Spotify. But maybe you can spell it out here. Like, where can people find you on Twitter?
Yes, you can go to our um, company Twitter, which is just vaults FYI, VAULTS FYI. And then you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Rodenbaugh, RyanRodenbaugh.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure to give Ryan a follow.
Please.
Awesome. So thank you, Ryan, for jumping on. I enjoyed it talking about data again and data infrastructure in this podcast. So yeah, appreciate you having this conversation with me.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me. And yeah, hope to chat again soon.
Thank you. See you next time.